Deshaun, thank you so much for joining us again. I really, really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
So your debut novel, In West Mills, is the selection of the Our State Book Club for this month. Can you tell us a little bit about the novel? In the last episode, you mentioned the protagonist. Um, and I guess she's the protagonist. She's in some ways an anti-hero,
Mhm.
but Azalea Knott Center. Can you tell us a little bit about the novel and what led you to write it as your debut?
Sure, yes. So the novel, while the book technically has two protagonists, I tend to think of not as the primary protagonist.
Mhm,
Um, the book is about a woman who, at the start of the novel, she is 26 years old and she has a drinking problem that everyone knows about. Uh, she is she is not your typical alcoholic. She's very high functioning and she's a very intelligent school teacher who came from a middle class black family, which is unusual or not as common, I should say, in the 1940s in North Carolina. Um, and she makes some choices that people frown upon aside from her drinking. She's a bit promiscuous. She tends to be very choosy with the men, so it's not like everyone is just allowed to walk into her home or into her bedroom. Um, but even that activity is just really frowned upon. So she's a bit of a pariah. And then there's her close friend who is sort of like a older brother figure to her, Otis Lee. And the two of them they love each other dearly in a non-romantic way, but they are often at odds because
mhm.
he's sort of straight and narrow, and he's always trying to get her to stop having so much fun, uh, pretty much. Um, and so, I won't spoil the novel for those who may want to read it, but the novel follows them for almost 50 years and watching how Knott's early her early adulthood decisions sort of come back, and I don't want to use the word haunt her, but they make her grow up in some ways throughout the novel. And Otis Lee has he's battling with his own secrets and that sort of some secrets he knows about and some he doesn't know about that not knows about him. um but the reason why I wrote this novel is because I so the character Not is based on one of my great uncle's girlfriends, and she was a big part of my life growing up. She was around the family. In fact, I thought she was his wife for a very long time. um but she passed away when I was 10, and she was not an old woman. I don't think she was more than 60, 61 years old at the time. Um, but she was like an aunt to me. And so sometime a few years before I think I started writing the novel, she popped in my mind and I wrote a story about her, a version of her life. It was highly fictionalized, except for the alcoholism. Um, and so when I did get into the Audio Writers Workshop, I decided to put that story up for workshop, and everyone just kept saying, It feels like you're trying to pack a novel into
Mhm.
these 30 pages." And we think this might be a novel. It needs room to breathe. And at first I resisted that feedback. I did not think of myself as a novel writer. I
Yeah.
always thought I would be a story writer. Now I can't write a story to save my life. It always turns into something big.
Mhm.
Um, but that's the way I came to write that. Just thinking about Not and wanting to create a different life for her than what she had, but not remove the very real parts of her that I remember from the real life Not.
Yeah.
So that's the way the novel came to be. Yeah.
What I find really interesting and honestly refreshing about the novel is that Not is a woman who is imbued with a lot of traits that are normally masculine traits
Yes.
of male characters. She does have sexual agency. She
Mhm.
does enjoy a drink. She's very outspoken, and it turns a lot of heads, both for people in the town and also for readers and critics. There's a lot of
Mhm.
views that say, "You've never seen a protagonist like this. You've never
Mhm.
seen a female character like this." And I found that very, very refreshing that she has this much agency as a Black woman, uh, in a rural town in the 1940s.
Yeah.
But then Otis Lee Loving, her friend, is also an unconventional male character. He is
Mhm.
very sensitive. He is
Yeah.
very domestically minded. Um,
Yes.
this novel borrows a lot from Victorian literature, especially Dickens. Not as a
Mhm.
huge fan of Dickens. Otis Lee is the angel in the house, the kind of
Yeah.
Victorian female character who is the moral center of the home and makes sure everybody's on the straight and narrow.
Right.
What made you decide to create a male character that is so different from how Black men are classically represented in Black American literature, even by Black authors?
Yeah. Well, you that is the exact reason. I wanted to write a Black male who was present for his wife, present for his child, who was looked upon r respectably by his peers and neighbors and even his, employers, you know?
Mhm,
I We see so so many novels today and in the past have really bad Black men,
mhm,
and I know just like there are for every group for every group, there are bad people within that group.
sure.
Um, but something I think we see a little too much of is bad Black men.
Mhm,
And I said, well, if I'm gonna write bad Black male characters, there's gonna be some good ones in the book
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
And I decided to make my good one part of the center of the novel.
mhm,
I
absolutely.
decided that I would not do that. Some of the writers that I love very much, um, and someone's gonna send the police after me after hearing this, but I think that Toni Morrison and Alice Walker, I think some of their books were a little too hard on Black men.
Mhm,
And I did see that fluctuate. Toni Morrison does have great, strong Black male characters. They may not be perfect, but they are there for their wives, there for their
mhm,
children. Um, but I think Black men get it really hard in
yeah,
literature,
yeah,
and I just really refused to do it. I
yeah.
refused to do it.
I'm thinking about Paul D in Beloved. He's not
Yeah.
necessarily an admirable character, or
Right.
Make Dead in Song of Solomon, or even Milkman in Song of Solomon. It's,
Right.
kind of a jerk, you know?
Yeah.
And these aren't necessarily the men that you grew up around. You
No.
had, great Black male role models, in many instances. And did
Yeah.
you feel like you were not setting the record straight? I mean, a writer that I very much admire, S.A. Cosby, who's kind of blown up. He's a Black writer from
Mhm.
Virginia. He says you should never write to settle scores. But I think that you can write an homage to the people that you know, and
Yes.
it had a huge impact on your life. Did you
Well,
feel like in creating a character like Otis Lee that you were acknowledging these strong Black male figures that you had in your life?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was very, very conscious of it.
Yeah.
Very conscious of it. And not all the Black male men in my life were perfect. My father had sides, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and and so I didn't want, Otis Lee, he Otis Lee might be just a slightly unrealistically good. Um, but I think the Black male characters I've written since him are a blend of
Sure.
good and bad. like human beings, like most
Yeah.
human beings.
And they're much more interesting that way.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll be right back with Deshaun Charles Winslow.
Elon University is proud to support the Our State Book Club. In the same way great authors bring North Carolina stories to life, Elon is committed to fostering knowledge, creativity, and lifelong learning across our state. Discover how Elon University shapes thoughtful leaders at www.elon.edu.
We're back with Deshaun Charles Winslow. Deshaun, In West Mills is a truly immersive book. Atmospherically, you paint and portray this community, and you render them so clearly. In the last segment, you mentioned how we trace the evolution of these two characters, their relationship, Not and Otis Lee, over 50 years. And I taught the book, I think a year ago in a literature class at UNC Asheville, and you were kind enough to Zoom with us. But my students were just, and many of them want to be writers, they were just amazed to be so swept up in a relationship as it evolves and
Mhm,
not necessarily a plot as it
mhm,
unwinds. How
mhm.
did you make the decision to make this a novel driven by the evolution of characters and not by the play-by-play of a plot as it unfolds?
Yeah. Ooh, I I don't know if I can take credit for the decision for it to be heavily plot driven. I think that had a lot to do with because I was writing this book while I was in a MFA program.
Mhm.
I think I was just being introduced to character driven work.
Sure.
And a lot of the books that we read, um, and even short stories that we read had very there would be just a quiet plot humming in the background,
Yeah.
but it was about character. It was about character. And so when I decided to start to turn that story into a book, um, part of the reason why there are these big leaps in time is because I was like, okay, I got to move this thing along. I got to get people who were born in the first few chapters. They got to grow up quickly, so that there's some plot coming in the background about
Mhm.
about Knott's previous life or early adult life. Um, but for me, the plot, I just wasn't reading much plot. I
Mhm.
was watching a lot of plot on TV, but
Sure.
I was not reading plot driven books at
Yeah.
all. So I think that's why it happened. Now, my second book has a lot more plot.
I was gonna ask
And
about that, yeah. Decent People is
yeah,
a lot more plot driven.
yeah,
Tell us about
yeah.
that book, Decent People.
Sure. Decent People, also set in the fictional town of West Mills, is sort of centered around there's not one protagonist in this book. But this book is centered around a triple murder, and I would say the hot button, the hot topic of this book is probably homophobia slash class, I think.
Mhm. It's a very
That,
class-driven book, absolutely.
yeah, yeah, and racism, because I think racism is kind of drives the actual murder.
Mhm.
Um, But it's set in the same town, and you get to go into the homes of about 4 different people if you count the sleuth herself. And this murder is committed. The finger is being pointed at one person, but people aren't so sure he did it.
Mm.
And his girlfriend, the sleuth, is like, "Yeah, I doubt he did it. He may have."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, and I think for readers, the joy is that she herself is not 100% sure. She's trying
sure.
to also convince herself that he is innocent. But,
And she's awfully close to the suspected murderer,
right.
you know?
Yeah, he's not just a neighbor.
He's not just a neighbor.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, that's the gist of the book. It's a murder mystery, but I laid the social issues on fairly heavy, I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, what I found so interesting about that book, you mentioned racism and kind of racial dynamics, but within, the Black community, there's a lot of, like, classism that
absolutely.
is driving suspicions,
Right,
blame, and that's just something that I think that maybe readers won't have seen before or won't
right.
necessarily be expecting, and I found that so interesting. I wanna close out, last episode, I asked you about some books that might prepare someone for leaving home, maybe moving to
Mhm.
New York, maybe moving somewhere else. To close this out on this episode, I wanna return you culturally, culinarily, back home. You're from Elizabeth City, there in Eastern North Carolina,
Yeah.
also the original home of one of our previous guests, Bland Simpson, who's
Mhm.
a wonderful nonfiction writer from North Carolina who lives in Chapel Hill now. But you live outside New York City, as you said. What are some foods, maybe a handful of foods, 4 or 5 dishes that when you're back home or when you're in away from home, you're like, "Oh, I miss this so much," or "I can't
Yeah.
believe I can't get this." What are some things that come to mind as you're sitting right now in your apartment outside of New York that if you were home in Elizabeth City, you might get X for lunch?
Right, right. Something that I do not see here is Watergate salad.
Mm,
I probably can find it in, South Jersey, maybe.
I don't even know what Watergate salad is. What is that?
It's like, a salad that I think most people use whipped cream as the base with fruits thrown in, like pineapple, grapes,
Mhm.
um, usually sort of like hard texture fruits. And some people put coconut in it, some people put nuts also in it. But that's something that I got that was always available in my hometown, and my mother at least once a month would buy a small tub of it. And I remember when I was little, I didn't like it. And then as I became maybe 12, 13, I started to like it. And then she would have to get larger,
Yeah,
larger
yeah.
amounts. Yeah. So Watergate salad, uh, dumplings. So where I come from, we called it pot pie, but it's
Mhm.
not pot pie like when you see in a grocery store. It was a pot with dumplings that had been rolled out with dough and boiled, and the meat could be chicken, duck, goose. Um, but most of the women who made it in my family, they did it with either duck or goose because I
Mhm.
guess doing it with chicken was just too basic. And so these are things that I can make these things. I
Oh,
can.
wow.
But they will never taste the way it tasted when I was a kid growing up with a 79-year-old woman
Sure. Yeah,
making it.
yeah.
They will never taste that way. Um, Hush puppies, there are some places here in New York that have hush puppies, but they treat it as like a delicacy because it's a southern thing. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, hush puppies are sold everywhere all day below the Mason Dix.
They just bring them to the table
Like,
for free when you sit down.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Tomato pudding is something that I grew up eating, not
I've
liking
never
so
had
much as
tomato
it's
pudding. I've never had that.
yeah. It's not even a lot to it. It's tomatoes boiled down, but you don't cook them so long that they turn into like a tomato sauce. You don't cook them
Mhm.
quite that long. But there's sugar, probably some citrus, lemon or lime, and I think like cinnamon and nutmeg. Really.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
tomato pudding, and I've never had it with a crust. My mother never made it with a crust. She would cook it on the stove first, then put it in the oven, and it would solidify a little bit.
Mm.
Um, but I miss that, and that's not something I've seen in the
Yeah,
North.
sure, yeah.
but I have to say a lot of restaurants, especially in Harlem, are bringing these dishes up. I'm
That's
starting to
great.
see it on the menu, on the
Yeah.
menus now, but I'm like, y'all not doing it the way.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. That's great. Well, Deshaun, this has been so wonderful. I've really, really enjoyed this, and I
Likewise.
loved in West Mills, and I thought the world of Decent People as well. So thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for giving me this time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Elon University believes in the power of stories to engage and inspire our community. That's why Elon is proud to sponsor the Our State Book Club, showcasing conversations with writers who reflect the heart of our state. Learn how Elon University is igniting discovery and dialogue in North Carolina at www.elon.edu.
From day one at Elon University, you're empowered. Engaged learning, meaningful mentorship, celebrated individuality. Transform your potential into purpose and become a leader the world needs at Elon University.
What might it be like underneath the sunrise in a state of flight? Coming back on me, it seems wonderful, the wandering mountain birds on a beach. Never moments ever wasted, turning away from your love. Honeybees, gardens of sweeter fruit, never tasted, no turning to other things. Will you be? Will you sing? Sweeter fruit never tasted. Don't turn your back on me. Mountains pushing into the sea.